Howdy folks, I'm Southern Wolf of Southern Wolf Studios. Welcome back to Samurai of Hyuga. Let's check out our stats. Calculative is still at 64%. Perverted is still at 64%. Charming and Stoic are still at 50%. Protective is still at 64%. And Finesse is still at 63%. Our attunement is at 50%. Chapter 9. Poison Flower Tears. Cho, pair. Twos is even. The Bakuto, a professional gambling addict and a glorified homeless person, smiled with his lack of teeth on full display. It was the sort of face that deserved to be punched. At least that's what I gathered from Hachi's body language, which shook in either ecstasy or misery at every roll of the dice.
I couldn't help but notice that the latter was far more frequent.
Keep this up, Sonny, and the samurai friend might have to hawk his sword. Yeah.
Hachi's opponent chided him in a way only an old man could.
But the only way he was getting my katana was through his torso.
Why was I wasting my time here? We had dumped Mitsumi and Toshi off at the Raigengu dojo, named after the Street Fighter's ridiculous fighting style. The word dumped was appropriate, given the condition of the caved-in floorboards and the dead bonsai trees that greeted us. But the kid was intent on writing her Shingenja magic down, so I found myself stuck with Hachi in search of a snake spirit on my own.
We weren't making much progress.
Mr. Samurai, I don't suppose you have a couple spare row you could lend me? Pay it back, of course. You just gotta wipe that grin off this geese's face. You know how it is. Hachi squeezed his eyes and his palms together tightly, meekly begging for his afternoon old pal to bail him out.
Time was one thing, but wasting row as well?
I don't have time to waste on your gambling addiction.
Stoic test, passed. Attunement has increased.
I don't have time to waste on your gambling addiction. I need information. Even riding off the buzz of my warm sake, my words were ice cold. Hachi had no idea just how important the task that had laid before us was. Ignorance was bliss, but I couldn't afford to spend all day listening to old men count dice. I didn't have the pockets or the sanity for that. The Jinjinto native lowered his shoulders with a gigantic sigh of defeat. You really ought to lighten up. But I hear ya. He turned and beckoned out to the rest of the occupants in the cramped gambling den. Any of you old-timers hear about a snake? Maybe a new gang like those river serpents or the crimson cobras? The crowd only gave mutters in response, except for an old bald man sporting a nose as broken as a glass sandal. When he approached, I noticed tattoos running down his neck. A snaked woman. This man was no doubt a yakuza. Or used to be one anyway. Perverted. Had to ask him who does this ink later. It was giving me some ideas. Hope that Hachi hadn't thrown me into a gang war. Our guest eyed us over before responding in a low baritone. A tall man with bandages on his arms. I know you. You run around with Tenjiro. That's right. Hachi's eyes brightened up at the sound of his name. He went into his uppercut gesture as he was apt to do. You're damn right. And still do. What's Tankun up to these days? Last I heard he was crying about a summer flu. What a baby. Well, I couldn't care less about Tankun. There was something in the bald man's voice that held my attention. Hachi's enthusiasm made the thug's eyes sink lower, and weakened the proud posture he held just a moment before. I know Yakuza wear their pride on their sleeves, and that they were prideful of nothing else. Something wasn't right. You don't know? Damn. Tenjiro died of opium just 3 days ago. Well, I only known the man for an afternoon. It didn't seem like Hachi to go silent all of a sudden. The burly Yakuza bowed respectfully before turning to his table, but the entire mood of the gambling den had grown somber. Murmurs from our fellow gamblers sounded off in similar circumstances around the dangerous drug. My mind idly wandered back to the old woman who had approached us at the gates. Those sunken eyes and that sweat-drenched kimono, the desperation in her voice. Opium had never been this big of a problem before. With the gamblers more interested in talking than tossing dice, the host made a call to close up early. It was starting to get dark out,
And while I didn't want to face Mitsumi empty-handed,
there was always tomorrow to look for that spirit. As for my spirit, it groaned at the idea of prolonged stay in this overstuffed city amidst a hot summer. I kept my complaints to myself. Hachi's expression was still one of shock. He mumbled to himself in a trance, whispering half-spoken regrets and memories. He had just lost a friend, whatever those were, and it stung. I couldn't comfort the guy even if I wanted to. My mind just couldn't grasp the pain of losing a loved one. for obvious reasons. Was it that ignorance that had helped me become such a talented assassin? That was a thought for another time. With the den empty, we really ought to head out. You look like you could use another drink. You look like you could use another drink. The Raigenju dojo could wait. While I've ended more lives than I can count, I never had the displeasure of mourning someone dear to me. But my educated guess was that it, most like most of life's trouble, was easier to go through when you're drunk. That, and I felt it was better wasting my row on fermented rice instead of dice. Domo. Thanks for the offer, Okami. I know I come across as a tough guy, but the truth is, Hachi clutches his fist into his hands, knuckles widening as he spoke, his eyes letting loose a floodgate of tears, 2 rivers that ran down the curves of his cheeks and off his chin. He yelled out at the empty gambling floor, his frustration shaking his very core. Damn it! Takako was getting married this winter. Bastard had himself a job fixing boats. How could he throw it all away? He was gonna make it a stupid-ass Koshinuki. He had everything, Okami, going for him. I respected no. I envied his life. So why? Why did he do it? His watery eyes peered into my soul and I waited for a reply. I had none. I was so engrossed in his outcry I didn't even notice that the two of us were no longer alone. She was an unmistakable woman who tore open the sliding screen door and heaved herself onto mine in Hachi's private hall. The pale blue kimono she wore threatened to slip right off her shoulders. But decadency seemed far from her most pressing concern. Her hurried breaths and long drenched mane of her black hair was well enough to tell me that she'd been out for quite the run. Our eyes locked only for a second. I was accustomed to seeing desperation, how desperate people tend to gravitate towards me. It's the burden of carrying a katana. Samurai! She was drawn towards me like a koi is to a worm. The joke's on her. I'm a monkey. I found myself taken off guard by her sizable assets that now pressed up against my face as she held on to me for dear life. I ought to be drifting above one of the high planes of heaven right now.
But reality set in all too quickly.
Beautiful women always carry more baggage than homely ones did. This one's baggage came in the form of 2 well-scarred thugs who followed in behind her.
The courtesan, or whatever she was, pressed up behind me. I couldn't see her, but I could certainly feel her.
But back to the matter at hand.
Oi, give the winch over and there won't be no trouble.
The grunt wielding a pair of farming sickles known as kamas yelled out. I called them rice cutters, but they could slice through limbs if you were talented enough. They were awkward to use effectively, but they were great for grappling opponents.
Yeah, that's Shiroyama's property.
His buddy added in while tightening his grasp on a sharp-looking hatchet. Like the kama, it's a peasant weapon not made to be used on people. Its greatest fault is its tendency to get stuck between bones and tendons. But I was done scrutinizing their weapons. Why do the name Shiroyama seem so familiar? Just so you know, I'm better with my katana than I am dice. Impulsive test. Fail. I thought it was a nice gesture to give them a warning. My attention turned to the sensation that rubbed against my back, which pleaded once more. Please, I beg of you. My name is Momoko Hayami. Shiroyama will force me. My heart can't bear to work for that monster any longer. Her words muffled into the back of my neck, which heated with every breath she took. Tears of a beautiful maiden ran down my spine, urging me to her rescue. This is as romantic as it gets for a bodyguard. But romance aside, she wasn't my client. Regardless of who she was, Momoko's arms created a vice above my waist. In this ludicrous position, I couldn't even unsheath my katana. My threat turned hollow and the thugs made their approach with renewed enthusiasm.
Looks like your luck ran out, Samurai.
My heart started racing. I was in serious danger here. I didn't have time to act like a gentleman. Momoko got an elbow to her stomach, and I could apologize later. More importantly, she fell off me and freed up my hands. I was going to need them if I was going to clean up this mess of hers. The rush of battle flew through me as it always did, but it was Hachi who was riled up the most. His words were half anger, half joy. Let's do this, Okami. We can't let these assholes lay another finger on this innocent lady. This is for Tan-kun. I wasn't naive enough to say that she was innocent of anything, but I wasn't going to argue. If rescuing this dame was what it took to get him out of his depression, then I guess Shiroyama was going to be down a working girl. Attack the kama wielder. While I was confident in my ability to take on both untrained lowlives, Hachi would probably have the better luck dealing with the axe than the pair of kamas. Those sharp hooks like to grab onto anything you extended and yanked hard.
Perverted.
Maybe that's why they call them hookers. Typical fighters tend to speed up his pace right before getting into range of his opponent. It's called a lunge. It's certainly effective in most cases, but the sudden change in distance can be accounted for, and judging by the way my opponent kept his hook centered, he was waiting for me. It pained my pride in his assassin when he made it so obvious. Instead of a lunge, I stopped, watching his failed counterattack. I stabbed him right through his mouth.
That one moment of hesitation was all I needed to unbalance him.
Action is faster than reaction, since his words, not mine. I turned towards my lanky companion's opponent, the axe wielder. I was honestly unsure how this battle would end. Hachi was tougher than most, but toughness wasn't going to save you against a sharpened iron. What unfolded surprised even a veteran warrior like me. Hachi managed to get a yell out before the axe made its way to splitting his skull.
Raijin Guru, secret technique! Iron palm defense!
Catching the business end of the axe with his palm of your hands, well, that's a new one.
I wasn't sure if Hachi was renovating or making a mockery of the art of fighting, but his grip held the axe steady, and the two combatants, they just sort of stood there.
Some help, Samurai, old pal. I let out a sigh and finished off my drinking buddy's opponent for him. A single, well-placed slice down the back. The battle was won. Or so I thought. Hachi groaned and blew on his hands, red as sensitive from the iron palm defense technique. It would not get sympathy from me. I want the blood from my katana before letting my curiosity take hold. I don't understand. If you have the agility and strength required to catch a bladed weapon mid-strike, why not just dodge the attack altogether? It just didn't make sense. I had overlooked something, a nuance perhaps, some sort of unarmed versus armed combat I'd never seen. I had to ask. And after I did, I wish I hadn't. Jeez, then it wouldn't be called iron palm defense now, would it? Thought you picked up on things quicker than that, Okami. Hachi's boyish smile tested my self-controlled anger in ways I didn't even realize. This guy was hopeless. Arigato gozaimasu. Momoko bowed towards me and the street fighter in deep respect. The bow was low enough to where, well, Hachi's face blushed crimson. Not much was left to the imagination, but I had questions that needed answering. Charming. Momoko-chan. The name's Okami, and this is Hachirobi. I'm curious as why you were playing chase with those two. You're safe with us so long as you tell the truth anyway. I pulled off an affable smile. Although, it's been said that it only makes me appear even scarier, it's amazing how I can provide a sense of security in the form of a threat. Her visible squirm made it evident how uncomfortable she was. I could tell this woman was a mystery I might not want to solve. She opened her mouth to speak, her delicate voice straining at every word. It may not appear like it in this outfit, but I'm a doctor. I studied under... No, it doesn't matter. What does matter is Shiroyama's poisoning Jinjinto with... Behind you! Her voice heightened in a shrill warning. A small man crouched like a frog in the entrance. He held a blowgun to his mouth, posed to strike.
And he blew the dart at Momoko's neck.
And sheathed the sword. I wasn't a sacrificial soldier who threw himself in front of every danger out there. If I was, I'd still be a samurai. So instead I... Watch out! Hachi dived as he yelled, extending his entire frame to grab the dart with an open hand. It was an impressive display of reaction speed. However, the grab was less than a catch as it was more of a block. A painful block that the street fighter crumpled hard against the floor. I had taken my eyes off the man with the blowgun only for a second, but he was gone. I tried to give chase, but it was painfully obvious he knew Jinjinto better than I. I ended up alone and frustrated in a back alley under the faint moonlight. With Hachi hurt and Momoko defenseless, I gave up the hunt and retreated my steps back to the gambling den. The scene wasn't pretty. His head raised on the lap of the woman in the revealing kimono, a position I'm sure he'd otherwise love to be in. Through from the sound that he was making, he was in serious pain. Ah, it stings! Damn it, my hand's burning off! The street fighter's hand wasn't on fire, but it was changing to an unusual shade of purple. I did not know much about poison, except for the fact that the longer we waited, the less chance that Hachi would have to pay me back for the sake he owes me. And while my mind tried to stay calm, my nerves were panicked. Finesse. We don't have much time to waste. We need to draw the poison out before it spreads. I'll carve out around the entry wound where one of us can suck it out of him. Using my katana as a scalpel didn't exactly appeal to me, and neither did kissing a poisoned, bloody gash. Was I really ready to do it? Thankfully, I would get out of it. Okami-san, sucking the poison out is only a fictional myth that only risks bacterial infection to the wound. We need a safer place to lie him down. Warm water and preferably sour milk mixture. After that the doctor trailed on and I nodded in only a vague understanding. What was clear to me was the weight that I bore on my shoulders as I dragged Hachi's oversized frame off of the Raiginju dojo. Calculative. I leaned against a screened wall as much as I dare for fear of falling straight through. This dojo had seen better days, and a decade without any upkeep showed. But I'd criticize my host later, when he wasn't wailing in imaginable pain. Yeah. Even a Jinjinto tough guy couldn't shrug this one off. This wasn't some watered-down nightshade toxin. After I managed to carry him over here, his condition only grew worse. He clenched his teeth so tightly that they might as well break. I looked over at the doctor who was busy wiping sweat from her patient's brow. Hachirobi-kun, please stop trying to get up. You need to try to calm your breathing. Momoko tried and failed to subdue her lanky companion. She turned those opal eyes of hers to me, asking me without saying a word. The talent of all beautiful women seemed to have. I pressed off against the wall and stepped in to help. Although I'd been nothing but trouble, any man that fought by my side deserved a better death than this. I'm not a gambling man, but I'd wager he's still upset over Tan-kun. I need to calm his nerves. Cool down, Hachi. Most guys dream of getting nursed back to health by such a beauty. Attunement has increased. Cool down, Hachi. Most guys dream of getting nursed back to health by such a beauty. That turned the lucky bastard's grimace into something more of a grin. His breathing was still ragged, but at least he had grown content with the situation. It was about as much comfort as a poison man could have. I was just relieved that he was still attentive enough to appreciate my remark. It meant that he had a good chance of pulling through. The face Momoko gave me was a bit difficult to read. Embarrassed and upset, with some appreciation in there too. I stepped aside so she could proceed to get to work. Now, I don't want you to speak, but please nod or shake your head in response to the following questions. Momoko paused for a second before she shot out a score of inquiries at Hachi. Particularly how his body felt, what levels of pain were in each one, what type of pain, what could be moved and what couldn't. The inquisition went on for some time. I found my fatigue putting me into a daze whenever a hand tugged on my kimono sleeve. The kid. How does Hachirobi-san fare? Surely he's not, protective. Nah, he'll make it through. I finished Matsumi's question for her. Honestly, I didn't know what Hachi's chances were. The doctor would give me a much better guess than I, but I did know something. That dart wasn't intended to kill. If it hit the proper target, Momo-chan's neck, we'd be in search of a Shinto priest to give funeral rites. I shall pray for his swift recovery. You should hurry up and eat the meal that Toshi-san has prepared. The Shingenja erupted into several more coughs as I had forgotten about her cold in the midst of the gambling and Yakuza fighting I've been up to. What subject should I bring up? How's your cough? Attunement has increased. How's your cough? Matsumi's cough might have let up compared to when we were on the road, but it's still a concern of mine. The air in Jinjinto wasn't especially fresh and easy on one's lungs. I was reminded of the Emperor's necklace, which remained unsold and tied around the kid's neck. My stare drew out an earful. On to more relevant concerns. While you were busy gambling with lowlives, I've been in contact with the spirits in this area. Through them and my deft understanding of calligraphy, I've managed to produce several scrolls that may aid us in our future endeavors. At the least, the kid was being productive, and my concern still drifted towards her health. The well-maintained, almost doll-like hair of hers was in a mess. Porcelain skin was flecked with sunburns, and her eyes carried shadows from fatigue, and of course, the cough persisted. You don't look well. And she didn't. But that didn't stop her from taking exception to me for pointing it out. And what if my appearance? It is of little concern next to Hachirobi-san's. In fact, it seems to me that I'd be far safer away from your side than by it, judging from... She stopped. I let my guilt show on my face, with shame of being unable to prevent this outcome. My afternoon acquaintance was dying. That's all he was. But the knot in my stomach was tighter than ever before. Why should I care what happens to him? Why did I? I walked out to get some air. Okami, I didn't mean it,
Matsumi pleaded out behind me.
but I didn't pause my steps. Kids always mean what they say. If I had taken up the pipe, now would be a great time for a smoke. That's the thought that occupied my mind as I stared out into the dimly lit ghetto Raiginju dojo that was nestled in. It was well past midnight, beyond the time even lowlives were active. I sat on the unpolished stairs in the back, and considered staying there till sunrise. I'd already forfeited the idea of sleep. It was warm, of course, being summer, but the warm night was unusually pleasant. This one was anything but. I could hear Hachi's loud moanings even from out here. I listened intently, as if in a prayer that would help ease his pain. More accurately, I prayed that he keep crying out just so I could be sure he wasn't dead. I was so intent on listening I didn't notice the footsteps behind me and a hand started on my shoulder. Instinct crept in and I had my katana drawn and pressed against the neck of a very surprised ninja. Toshi gulped, to her credit, only showed fear for a moment. Okami-san, I was worried when you didn't come for supper. You must be hungry after tonight's events. This was a comedy my stomach would growl right then and there, but it wasn't, and it didn't. Instead of, I sighed and placed my sword back into its scabbard. I went back down to my seat and to my surprise, the kunoichi sat down beside me. Hashimoto-san, she wanted me to tell you that she apologizes. I felt the weight of Toshi's stare, but I ignored it and opted to look into the cloudless sky. No chance of rain, yet the air was still humid. I realized why the weather was such an easy topic to talk about. The kid thinks I'm a failure. Attunement has increased. The kid thinks I'm a failure. I'd like to claim that I didn't care what anyone thought of me, play it off like I'm a ruthless killer, stone cold and without conscience. But the truth is, I'm more of a lukewarm pebble. Not to say that I'm half a decent person, of course, just that I'm human like the rest of them. Letting my undersized employer down like that burned my insides like wasabi paste. If that's what you think, Toshi remarked, then you are not as perceptive as you let on. But that's another matter. There are some details that I've failed to tell you regarding Satsuma's dreams, Okami-san. Toshi paused to let my mind linger. Linger it did. Just how many secrets can a young ruler have? He spoke of smaller spirits who would aid the sword who cuts the heavens in his journey. I assumed it was simply myself and Hashimoto-san. However, Hachirobe-kun seems to be quite fond of you. It appears to possess an allure that perhaps you yourself aren't even aware of. But as for Momoko-san, she looked back towards the hallway. No one was there, of course. I believe she is hiding information from us. I, for one, am glad you didn't come to harm on that one's behalf. Am I free to risk my life where I so choose? Attunement has increased. Am I free to risk my life where I so choose? I knew what my companion was actually concerned about, and it wasn't my well-being. He was just worried that I'd kill over before His Imperial Majesty's vision came true, that her mission would end up a failure because of me. I could tell that much just from the look that Toshi gave me from time to time. Just as a weapon hired, or in this case enlisted to do a job. She could dress me in any title she wanted. The sword who cuts the heavens. What a bad joke. Toshi's focus fell down to my feet. I know you are free, but Okami-san, traveling with you and Hashimoto-san, I've truly enjoyed it. I'm happy to be by your side. You come across as harsh and hard-headed at times, but deep down, I know you care. You're a good person, even if you're afraid of exposing that side to others.
I've been called a lot of things, but a good person? That's a new one.
Say nothing. Attunement has increased. Toshi could read my spirits just by tracking the lines of my palms of my hand. She really ought to stop analyzing me beyond that, because what she'd find was about as opposite of a good person as you could get. I had a sensation that burned into my right wrist. Present amidst all the craziness that had happened today, it reminded me of who I truly am. I'm just a ruthless killer looking for an excuse, but it's better than not needing one. The kunoichi bowed and made her exit shortly after. I returned to listening to hear the rhythmic grunts and groans of a poisoned man struggling with death. What does it say about me that those sounds were what lulled me into the deepest sleep of my life? When I awoke, I was leaning against a pine tree in a forest that had just seen winter snow. The breeze was cold and chilling, the complete opposite of the stagnant summer draft I was used to. I stared at my own breath as it flew in front of me. The silence was what irked me the most. No cicadas in this cold. My head started itching. I ignored it but kept on, so I brought up my hand to scratch a furry snow monkey. I jumped up and smacked the thing off me. Picking bugs out of my hair? Do I look like a red-ass monkey to you? The primate ignored my question and started pulling bark off the tree. I stood there for a moment, looking for some deeper meaning behind it. I get it. You're my spiritual animal. What message are you trying to give me? I waited for the response, but I didn't get one. The first lucid dream I ever had ought to be more suggestive and stimulating. Instead, it was wasted on this nonsense. After watching the monkey stuff itself with pine wood crust, I was forced to listen it whistle in a high-pitched sound. not unpleasant, but it was pretty damn strange. It lingered on until it started shifting into something else. Junko. That name, as soon as I heard it, my vision blurred black into darkness. Junko. My throat stung and burned. My back was sore because I managed to fall asleep on a set of stairs. It was still dark. The sunrise was only a vague idea at this stage. I tried to think of anything but her, but I failed. Brown-haired woman, with those wild eyes and broad-faced grin. My fellow student Samuari and Ronin. My friend, no, we had skipped friendship altogether. The first woman I ever loved. First woman who ever loved me. Why my spirit critter croaked her name out was beyond me. Speaking of croaking, Hachi wasn't making any noises.
Perverted.
Usually when I open a man's room to see a woman straddling him, I apologize and promptly leave the way I came. But not in this case. Momoko was feeding him something, but I had no idea what. But judging by her surprise, complete fear of my unexpected presence, I had a hunch something wasn't right. She hopped off Hachi and nervously patted down the folds of her kimono. After she recomposed herself, she addressed me. There you are, Okami-san. Hachirobe-kun is breathing much easier now, thanks to the spirits. Yes, he should make a complete recovery. She nodded submissively a few times and kept her eyes far away from mine. I planted my hand atop my katana's handle not to pull it out, just to rest it there. The effect was usually enough to dissuade most wrongdoers. Toshi's distrust in this woman wasn't misplaced. But what was she hiding from me? Inspect Momoko. She was hiding something. I need to find it before she has a chance to throw it away. I had no clue what Momoko-chan's spirit animal was, but if I had to guess, it was a deer. She froze up like one when I approached, but refused to look at me with those doe eyes of hers. I needed to see what they held, those black pools, if I was going to get to the bottom of this. Charming.
I placed a finger under the tiny chin of hers and directed her over towards me. I could feel her body quivering in fear. Why are you afraid?
She answered the question, just not the one I was asking. That poison was most likely tiger snake venom. It's foreign and very rare. It's good that Hachirobe-kun is so strong, isn't it? So these Yakuza goons were wealthy enough to use the exotic stuff. Hachi was lucky to be alive. Oh, that was more due to his stubbornness than his strength. I was about to give up on my investigation when I spotted the doctor's left hand clenching tightly into a fist. She wasn't about to hit me with it, which only meant one thing. I twisted her wrist and plucked out its contents that she held so dearly. By the time she could react, I'd already figured out what it was.
The piece that solved Momoko's puzzle.
It was bark. It was soft and wet like a seed skin. The bitter aroma was unmistakable. I knew what it was. And I'm done playing games.
Poppy tears. She was giving Hachi opium.
I had an excuse to scratch an itch, so I took it. My katana was torn out like lightning and placed a sharp edge upward against Momoko's neck. It would be a problem if she breathed too deeply, but she wasn't breathing at all, which was fine by me. Except that I didn't want her passing out before I'd found out what I need to know. This addictive drug has been the scourge throughout Jinjinto. Now it's made its way to Hachi's stomach. From what I knew, making it wasn't a simple matter. It took a skilled doctor practiced in foreign medicine to know how it's done. You're making opium for Shiroyama! Jinjinto, the whole damn city is rotting from the inside because of you! I plunged my stare deep into those opals of hers that reflected a monster eyeing its prey, but gems didn't leak like her eyes did. Tears swarmed down her neck and onto my blade. Tears wouldn't fix all the victims of addiction. Tears wouldn't bring back Tankun from his early grave, but they did threaten to rush Sensei's last gift. So I removed it from the poison maker's neck. That didn't stop her tears, instead it strengthened them. They were cold. I knew because I felt them run down and across my stomach, where a sobbing face had fallen upon. It felt warm mumbling sensation as Momoko used my torso to muffle her cries. Hachi had saved this woman's life back at the gambling den. In return, she probably saved his. As screwed up as this whole mess was, for once in my life, I wasn't sure what to do. What could I do? I felt powerless, uncertain, and maybe even scared. All thanks to her poison-flowered tears.